briefly back to the trigger. When it comes out and the system sees what's in it, I'm going to be demonized by all the right people and all the usual suspects. You'll see why if you read it. Because what we've had over years and years and years and years, getting more and more extreme, is that anyone who criticizes Israel in any way, shape, or form is immediately dubbed anti-Semitic. And this is the methodology of what I call the anti-Semitism industry and the protection racket. Not to protect Jewish people from discrimination, but protect the elite that run the far-right government in Israel and its far right tyrannical military and intelligence networks from exposure. And so because this far-right government and intelligence military network has more and more to hide, the intensity of the anti-Semitism industry and the protection racket has to be ramped up also. So now everything is anti-Semitic. Now, here's a story from this week. Anti-Semitic. Benjamin Netanyahu slams HBO series about murder of Palestinian. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has called for a boycott of the producers of HBO series, which he says is anti-Semitic and slanders Israel. Netanyahu took to Facebook to call for a boycott of propaganda Channel 12 and its owner Keshet for creating the show Our Boys, which he says besmirches the good name of Israel. No one could besmirch the good name of Israel more than Benjamin Netanyahu. And he urged his followers to stop watching the channel, especially those who have a ratings meter in their homes. So it affects their advertising. Now, how interesting this is, because Netanyahu and his far-right government and intelligence networks are running a global campaign against the BDS movement that want a boycott of Israel until they conform to international law regarding the treatment of Palestinians. Netanyahu calls BDS anti-Semitic for calling for a boycott of Israel for those ends, a peaceful boycott. And of course, we've seen this kick off in recent times with Congress women in America banned from visiting Israel on the terms that they wanted because they are supporters of BDS and so on and so on and so forth. So BDS and boycotting is anti-Semitic, but it's okay for Netanyahu to call for a boycott of a television channel for the crime of running a program about the death of a murder of a Palestinian. I mean, if you had a study of which countries in the world are most applicable for the term hypocrites, then right up there at the top would be Israel, America and Britain. The hypocrisy capitals of the world. And think of the competition. Our boy tells the story of the murder of Palestinian Mohammed Abu Qadir, who was kidnapped and burned alive by 2 Israeli teenagers and an adult in 2014. Netanyahu slammed the series for not focusing on the kidnapping and murder of 3 Israeli teenagers who had been killed by Hamas militants before Qadir's kidnapping, sparking riots in Israel's war on Gaza in 2014. Netanyahu was criticized at the time for using the Jewish boys' deaths as a pretext to carry out raids and arrest hundreds of Palestinians, because, of course, hundreds of Palestinians were responsible for the deaths of the boys. And for the subsequent assault on Gaza, which saw 1,462 Palestinian civilians killed, including 551 children, by the Israel Defense Forces, the Israeli army. The assault destroyed much of Gaza's infrastructure and homes with over 6,000 airstrikes in 50 days. And so looking at the horrific murder of a Palestinian is now anti-Semitic to these people, because everything is anti-Semitic, because it's the only defense they have for what they're doing. And so the censorship has to be ramped up. You watched the reaction to me after Wednesday. So here's a story this week, which, absolutely is straight out of my own experience. Why are global organizations attacking a talk in small town Clovis, California? In the past 3 days, 4 massively powerful organizations with net assets totaling over $250 million have released aggressive statements condemning a small town lecture at a small town community college. Why is that? The American Jewish Committee, a global organization with 30 offices worldwide and net assets of almost $158 million, has taken a full-throated public stand against an event in sleepy Clovis, California, as has the Anti-Defamation League, with $81 million in assets, and Stand With Us, annual revenue $12 million, and a director of the Wiesenthal Center, another global organization with assets of $54 million, has spoken up as well. What sort of lecture could bring down this type of condemnation? Well, I've been there myself. What sort of lecturer could elicit descriptions like notorious for spreading vicious hate, noxious and propagandist? And the more important question of all, when and where is this event? Because it sounds like a must-see, the article says. Answer, 6 p.m., September 18th, at Clovis Community College Forum Hall in Fresno, California. The event was organized by GV Wire, a local news organization that, according to its website, strives to objectively explore. That's a no-no to the anti-Semitism industry for a start. Objectively explore, explain and expose the complex policy issues that impact our lives. We also will not hesitate to shed light on anything that stands in the way of a healthier and more prosperous world, quote, it says. Only a handful of topics can generate such excessive censure. Even fewer can activate such a high-powered defense team. It's about Israel, not the startup tech part or the spiritual tourism part, the apartheid part, the ethnic cleansing part, and the racism part, the parts that are, to say the least, controversial, the parts that some say deserve exposure and robust debate. Others call it hate speech and want it shut down. So who's this speaker? Well, it's a lady called Alison Weir, founder of If Americans Knew, and the president of the National Interest, president of the Council for National Interest. She has been writing and speaking about the Palestinian-Israel issue for over 18 years, advocating for transparency in the US government, that'll be the day, regarding aid to Israel, and calling for justice for Palestinians. Now, who would not call for justice for a people and transparency by a government? But no, it's anti-Semitic. The two organisations she leads have always been extremely diverse. Their boards and staffs include people from a variety of races and ethnicities, including Asian American, African American, Hispanic American, Jewish American, and Muslim American, to name a few. Weir's belief that all Americans, regardless of their race, religion, or political perspective, have the responsibility and need to be fully informed about Israel-Palestine, since all of our tax money is going to the over $10 million per day that American politicians give to Israel. Because mainstream media doggedly refuse to tell the truth about this issue, she has dedicated her career to the task. So here's a lady who is challenging the extraordinarily biased American government policies towards Israel, and by definition, she's anti-Semitic. ADL Central Pacific Regional Director Seth Brisk declared, under the pretense of political activism, Weir routinely employs classic anti-Semitic tropes. Brisk also maintains that Weir refers to Jews as an object of hatred of all the people among whom it has established itself. And, you know, smears and lying about what people are saying, knowing that most people will never check the facts and therefore accept it, is the absolute modus operandi of the anti-Semitism industry and the protection racket, which has contempt for rank-and-file Jewish people and uses them as a cover and a pawn in their game of stopping Israel being exposed. So, of course, anyone who's followed my history will know that that's happened to me time and time again. And for reasons already explained, you ain't seen nothing yet. But we either tell the truth, because that's what we're committed to doing, or we run away. And if people want to see me run away, well, they're going to wait for all eternity. And then there's this Vienna Cinema census film about Palestinian football. A lot of Palestinian footballers have had their legs blown off by the Israeli army. And this is a story about Palestinian football, which was going to be run by a Vienna cinema. And the story goes, activists are expressing outrage after a cinema in Vienna, Austria, absolutely controlled by this network, cancelled the Austrian premiere of a film about Palestinian football. Meanwhile, in Canada, campaigners are protesting a decision by the ruling Liberal Party, contradiction in terms, to drop a parliamentary candidate based on false allegations of anti-Semitism. BDS Austria, a group that supports the campaign to boycott Israel for its violations of Palestinian rights, says the cancellation of the screening of Yalla Yalla is censorship, which of course it is. The feature film is a Argentinian-Palestinian co-production that tells the stories of 7 Palestinians through their connection to football. The screening was supposed to take place at the Artists International Cinema on Tuesday, followed by a discussion with the producers, directors, and the film has been screened in dozens of cities worldwide. But they cancelled it at the last minute. And of course, my own film of my life and work, Renegade, was cancelled at the last minute in terms of one of its premieres in Los Angeles at the Aero Theater in Santa Monica. And that on the same basis. And of course, that movie does not even mention Zionism and Jewish people. But it doesn't matter because it's not about that. It's about using that as an excuse to stop information coming out. Just finally, before I could move on to another subject, another story here. The International Criminal Court judges have demanded a new investigation into the Israeli flotilla attack. Judges at the International Criminal Court ordered the chief prosecutor to reconsider her decision not to open a formal investigation into Israel's lethal attack on a humanitarian flotilla into Gaza nearly a decade ago. The order, issued by the ICC's appeals chamber, was a decisive victory for the victims of the attack who have been tirelessly seeking justice for crimes committed against them for over 9 years, Stoke White, the law firm representing victims, said in an emailed statement. In the early hours of 31st of May 2010, Israeli commandos boarded and seized boats in international waters in the eastern Mediterranean. Israeli forces carried out a particularly violent armed attack on the largest vessel, killing 9 people. A 10th victim died of his injuries in May 2014. At least 20 others were seriously injured aboard the vessel. In 2013, the Comoros, the country where the vessel was registered, brought a war crimes complaint to the ICC, International Criminal Court. The following year, the chief prosecutor, Fatou Bensouda, concluded that there was a reasonable basis to believe that war crimes under the court's jurisdiction were committed during the Israeli attack, but she still decided not to open a formal investigation, claiming the alleged crimes were not of sufficient gravity. So, attacking a ship in international waters and killing 10 people and maiming others is not of sufficient gravity to be a war crime. Extraordinary. I wonder if any pressure was brought on the judge to come to that conclusion, which is clearly ludicrous. I think it's just a conspiracy theory, and I wouldn't worry about it. In 2015, a panel of International Criminal Court judges found that the prosecutor made 5 serious errors in her decision not to proceed with an investigation and ordered her to reconsider. Despite this, in 2017, Bensouda again reaffirmed she would not open a formal investigation. The latest decision requires Bensouda to reconsider once again, and again the judges are scathing in their criticism of the prosecutor's conduct, because it's all a stitch-up, that's why. Quote, when the prosecutor is reconsidering her decision not to investigate upon a request by the pretrial chamber, it will not suffice for the prosecutor to do so in a perfunctory manner such that the authenticity of the exercise could be questioned, the appeal judges state. Rather, the prosecutor is required to demonstrate how she addressed the relevant issues in light of the pretrial chamber's directions. The judges state that the unfortunate language used by the prosecutor to express her disagreement with the earlier decision ordering her to reconsider demonstrates that she was entirely misinformed as to what was required of her in conducting the requested reconsideration. In another remarkable rebuke, the judges called Bensouda disrespectful and tell her to exercise more restraint when addressing chambers of the court. So obviously it's a stitch-up. And why can't that judge be overruled? Why should one judge be able to make a decision not to prosecute the war crime that Israel clearly committed because she decides not to do it? What kind of justice is that? It means you've only got to have one biased person to stop a whole prosecution happening. Crazy, man.